It was Christmas night, 1996. In a wealthy neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado, a little girl went to sleep in her bed and was never seen alive again. Her name was JonBénét Ramsey. She was 6 years old, a beauty queen, a daddy's little girl. And by the morning of December 26th, she was dead, strangled and beaten, hidden in the basement of her own home. Her killer wrote a ransom note. They used the family's own pen, their own paper, and demanded exactly $118,000, the same amount as her father's Christmas bonus that year. The police came. They searched the house. They found no signs of a break-in, and for hours, while detectives were standing right there, JonBénét's body lay undiscovered just one floor below their feet. That was almost 30 years ago. And to this day, nobody has been charged. Nobody has gone to prison, and her killer is still out there, possibly watching the same news reports you and I watched. This is the story of the most haunting, unsolved murder in American history. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this case breaks every person who tries to solve it. Now, before we get into what happened that night, I need you to understand who this family was, because this was not just any family. John Ramsey was a man who had built everything from scratch. He was the CEO of a tech company called Access Graphics, a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. The man was pulling in millions, and he lived like it. The family home on 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado was a 7,000 square foot mansion, 15 rooms, 9 bathrooms, a house that looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine. His wife, Patsy, she was something else. Former Miss West Virginia beauty queen, elegant, charismatic, the kind of woman who walked into a room and everyone noticed. And she was absolutely devoted to her children, especially her daughter, JonBenét Patricia Ramsey, born August 6, 1990, named after both her parents, JonBenét and Patricia. And from the very first moment this little girl stepped into the world, she had something, a presence, a spark. You could see it. By the time she was 6 years old, she had already competed in over a dozen child beauty pageants. Little Miss Colorado, National Tiny Miss Beauty, America's Royale Miss. We are talking rhinestone crowns, professional stage makeup, costumes that cost thousands of dollars. And every single person who ever watched her perform said the same thing. When JonBénét walked onto that stage, she owned it. Completely. So picture this family on Christmas Day, 1996. Successful father, beautiful mother, glowing, talented little girl. Holiday trip planned for the next morning. Gifts under the tree, everything perfect. Nobody in that house had any idea that before the sun came up, the next day, their entire world was going to be destroyed. And what was about to happen inside that home, even after almost 30 years, still has no answer. So it's Christmas Day, December 25th, 1996. The Ramseys spent the evening at their neighbor's Christmas party just down the street. John, Patsy, their 9-year-old son, Burke, and little JonBénét, dressed in a white turtleneck, black velvet pants, and a small gold crown on her head. By every account from everyone who was there that night, she was happy. She was laughing. She was running around with the other kids like any normal 6-year-old on the best night of the year. At some point during the evening, she ate a small plate of pineapple. Now I want you to remember that. The pineapple. It sounds like nothing right now, but later in this story, that detail is going to completely change the picture of what happened inside that house. So hold on to it. The family got home around 9:30 p.m. JonBénét had fallen asleep in the car. John carried her inside, up the stairs, and Patsy tucked her into bed, kissed her goodnight, and turned off the light. That was the last time either parent says they saw their daughter alive. Around 5:30 the next morning, Patsy came downstairs to make coffee. And right there on the back staircase, she found a note. Not a short note. Not a quick message. 2.5 pages, handwritten, long, and very strange. It said JonBénét had been kidnapped. It demanded $118,000 in ransom. And listen to how specific this is. $100,000 in $100 bills. And the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Exact denominations. Like whoever wrote this had planned every single detail. And that $118,000, that was the exact amount of John Ramsey's Christmas bonus that year. Not close to it. Not roughly. Exactly. The note warned the family not to contact the FBI, not to contact police, or JonBénét would be killed. And it was signed by something calling itself a small foreign faction. Patsy called 911 at 5:52 a.m., but she also called her pastor. She called her friends. And within an hour, the house, which should have been immediately sealed as a crime scene, was full of people. Neighbors sitting in the living room. Friends making coffee in the very kitchen where the ransom note was found. People walking through every single room, touching everything. Police arrived and searched the house. They checked every door, every window. No signs of forced entry anywhere. No broken locks. No shattered glass. Nothing to suggest anyone had come in from the outside. And the basement. They glanced inside and moved on. Hours passed. No ransom call came. No contact. Nothing. Then at 1 p.m., with detectives still right there in the house, John Ramsey went down to the basement one more time. He opened the door to a small wine cellar at the back. And there she was, JonBénét. Wrists bound, duct tape across her mouth, wrapped in a white blanket, strangled with a cord tied around her neck, skull fractured from a blow so hard it left an 8.5-inch crack. She had been dead for hours, and while everyone searched upstairs, while her mother wept in the living room, while detectives stood less than 30 feet above her. She was 6 years old, and her killer had been in that house the entire time. Now here is where this story goes from tragic to absolutely infuriating. What happened in the first 24 hours of this investigation is widely considered one of the worst law enforcement failures in American history. And the most painful part? Every single mistake was completely avoidable. When police arrived at that house, they made one catastrophic decision right at the start. They treated it like a waiting game, not a crime scene. Instead of immediately clearing the house and sealing every room, they allowed friends, neighbors, family members to walk freely through every single room. People were touching door handles, moving furniture, making phone calls from the house. A crime scene that needed to be completely frozen was contaminated beyond saving within the first 2 hours. And the basement, the room where JonBénét's body actually was, an officer opened that door, looked inside for a few seconds and moved on. She lay in that wine cellar for over 7 hours while detectives sat upstairs. Then when John Ramsey found his daughter and carried her body upstairs, he destroyed critical forensic evidence without even knowing it. The position of a body matters. The materials around it matter. The microscopic fibers on the floor matter. All of it gone in an instant. Investigators were furious, but there was nothing they could do. Then the politics started. The Boulder Police Department and the District Attorney's Office began openly fighting each other over how to run the investigation. Key detectives were pulled off the case halfway through. Sensitive details were leaked to the media almost every single day. The whole thing was collapsing in real time on national television. And then came the decision that still makes investigators shake their heads to this day. John and Patsy Ramsey, the two most important witnesses in the entire case, were not formally questioned by police until 4 months after the murder. 4 months. By then they had lawyers. They had time to prepare. Whatever raw, unguarded truth might have come out in those first shocking hours was long gone forever. Years later, one police source said it straight, and these are their words, not mine. "We messed the case up from the start, and now we are trying to fix it. Because of those mistakes, a killer has been walking free for almost 30 years. From the very first day, the eyes of the entire country landed on John and Patsy Ramsey. And once they landed, they did not move for years. The statistics gave investigators reason to look at them. The vast majority of child murders in America are committed by someone inside the home. There was no forced entry. The ransom note showed someone who knew the family's private finances. The note was written on paper from inside the house with a pen from inside the house. Everything pointed inward. The media coverage was absolutely brutal. John and Patsy appeared on CNN just days after their daughter's death, composed, polished, tearfully pleading for information. And people watching at home picked apart every single word, every pause, every blink. The court of public opinion had already made up its mind. Then in 1999, 3 years after the murder, something happened that the public would not find out about for another 14 years. A grand jury spent 13 months reviewing every piece of evidence in this case. 13 months. And at the end of it, they voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey on charges of child abuse resulting in death, and on charges of helping whoever killed JonBénét. They voted to charge them, both of them. But District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictments. He said the evidence did not meet the beyond a reasonable doubt standard needed for a conviction. Under the law, he had every right to make that call, and those documents were sealed, hidden from the public. For 14 years, nobody knew a grand jury had voted to charge the Ramseys, until a judge ordered the records released in 2013. Now here is where the story turns completely. In 2008, advanced DNA testing changed everything. Touch DNA analysis, a technique that didn't exist in 1996, identified a male DNA profile on JonBenét's clothing. On her underwear, on her long johns. That DNA did not match John Ramsey. It did not match Patsy Ramsey. It did not match their son Burke. It did not match anyone in the FBI's entire criminal database. Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey issued a formal written apology to the entire Ramsey family. After 12 years of suspicion, they were officially cleared, but Patsy Ramsey never heard those words. She had died of ovarian cancer 2 years earlier in June 2006, at 49 years old. Still suspected by millions of Americans of killing her own daughter. She never got her apology. She never got her name back. That is one of the most heartbreaking details in this entire story. 10 years after JonBénét was murdered, the world finally got the news it had been waiting for. Police had their man. Case closed. Or so everyone thought. In 2006, investigators had been tracking a man who was emailing a University of Colorado professor named Michael Tracy, who had been making documentaries about the Ramsey case. This man was using a fake name. He called himself Daxus, and over 4 years of emails he told Tracy things that made investigators sit straight up in their chairs. He claimed he had been with JonBénét when she died. He described details about the case that had never been released to the public. He even knew the private nickname JonBénét used for her grandmother. Investigators got involved. They set up a phone tap hoping to trace him. He never called, so they tried something else. They offered to send him the last original printed photograph of JonBénét. He agreed to pick it up from a UPS location in Bangkok, Thailand. And the moment he walked in to collect that package and they had him, his real name was John Markar, a 41-year-old former substitute school teacher who had fled the United States back in 2001 after being charged with possession of child pornography in California. And standing in front of cameras in Bangkok, he looked directly into the lens and said, "I was with JonBénét when she died. Her death was an accident. I loved her." The whole world stopped. Breaking news banners everywhere. Boulder police flew car back to the United States. There were TV cameras on the plane. He was given a full meal on the flight. Champagne, prawns, pâté, while the media reported every detail. Everyone was convinced. After 10 years, it was finally over. Then the DNA results came back. No match. Not even close. Carr's DNA did not match the profile found on JonBénét's clothing. There were no drugs found in JonBénét's system, which directly contradicted his confession. Investigators could not place him in Boulder, Colorado on December 25th, 1996. His own family came forward to say he was with them in Georgia and Alabama celebrating Christmas that year. The charges were dropped immediately. John Markar was released. He was then extradited to California to face the original child pornography charges, which were also eventually dropped because the evidence had been lost. The man who confessed to one of the most famous murders in American history walked completely free on every single charge, and JonBénét's real killer was still out there. That moment broke something in this case. After the car collapse, the investigation went cold for years. The media moved on. The public moved on. And a little girl who deserved justice kept waiting. So let's talk about the one piece of physical evidence that has outlasted every theory, every suspect, and every failed investigation: the DNA. From the very beginning, there was unknown male DNA found on JonBénét's body, on her underwear, under her fingernails, on her long johns. DNA that did not belong to anyone in the Ramsey family. DNA that did not match a single profile in the FBI's National Criminal Database. When it was first entered in 2003, in 2016, forensic scientists went back to that DNA using more advanced technology, and what they found made the case even more complex. The sample actually contained genetic markers from two separate individuals. Two people, not one. Which means, if the intruder theory is correct, there may have been more than one person in that house on Christmas night, 1996. Now here is the part that makes this feel different from every other update this case has had. The garrote, the cord tied around JonBénét's neck and tightened with a piece of her mother's paintbrush. Someone had to tie the knots in that cord. And tying knots leaves behind skin cells. The family's former criminal defense attorney said it plainly at CrimeCon 2025 in Denver, and these are his words. "I have pressed hard for DNA analysis of the knots in this garrote, which our DNA experts say could be promising, because someone had to tie those, and they're fairly sophisticated. That garrote is currently being tested right now, along with dozens of other items that were either never tested in 1996 or were only tested with technology that was primitive by today's standards. The cord used to bind JonBénét's wrists, a section of the paintbrush handle, swabs from her clothing, all of it in a laboratory right now, being put through YSTR and mitochondrial DNA sequencing, techniques so advanced they can pull a usable profile from a single skin cell left on a piece of rope nearly 30 years. Go Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redfern said it himself in December. Torsen, and I want you to hear this directly. It is never too late for people with knowledge of this terrible crime to come forward. And I urge those responsible for this murder to contact us. He is speaking directly to someone who is still alive, someone who knows exactly what happened in that basement. JonBénét Ramsey would have been 35 years old this year. Think about that for a second. She would have grown up, gone to school, maybe had a family of her own. And instead, the world only knows her as the little girl in the rhinestone crown whose killer has never been found. But right now, in 2026, and something is happening. In Boulder, Colorado, that has never happened before. And for the first time in a very long time, the people closest to this case are allowing themselves to feel something they haven't felt in years. Hope. A dedicated 5-person task force is actively working this case. Dozens of pieces of evidence are being tested at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, using technology that simply did not exist when JonBénét was killed. Partial DNA profiles have already been pulled from 2 separate items. John Ramsey, now 81 years old, attended CrimeCon in Denver in September 2025 and spoke publicly about the investigation still moving forward. His son Burke has offered to provide any new DNA samples investigators need. The family has never stopped pushing, and for anyone out there who knows something, Boulder Police have a direct tip line. The email is Boulder's Most Wanted, Boulder, Colorado. Gover's the phone number is 303-441-1974. Colorado has no statute of limitations for murder. It does not matter how many years have passed. A charge can still be filed. A conviction can still happen. JonBénét spent her whole short life performing for crowds, making people feel something. And 29 years later, she is still doing exactly that because her story refuses to go away. Because the people who loved her refuse to let it go away. And because somewhere out there the truth still exists. This case is not over. It has never been over. And when that DNA finally comes back with a name, the whole world is going to stop what it is doing and pay attention one more time. JonBénét deserves that. She always did.